All right. Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of the Let's Clear the Air podcast with your host, Luis Steven Carretero Cuevas. Shani Size is not currently here, but, we're still having a podcast for ourselves here at the Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice. I am joined with two of our very special guests, Ana Gonzalez, Executive Director here with CCAEJ, as well as Joaquin Castillejos, Organizing Coordinator here with the Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice. Welcome, guys. Welcome. And we wanted to specialize this podcast right now because currently, at the time of filming, we are in election season right now with only 5 days left before the November 5th elections. And we thought it was very imperative to discuss topics about how the election season, even to us as environmental, justice nonprofit organization, is important to us. So I thought, why not have the podcast here with us? And why not bring both two specialists who have worked so hard in the field throughout this, what is it, like 2 months, essentially? Like a lot of work we've been doing. No, even more than that, honestly, because we really do involve civic engagement with what we do here. So I'll have Ana Gonzalez start us off first with, what do you believe is the connection between environmental justice and elections?
Yeah, so I firmly believe that environmental justice is the umbrella of all the justices out there, right? And when we talk about environmental justice, it's very important to think about three pillars. So our natural environment, our social environment, and our built environment. And one of those important pillars that we're focusing on right now is our social environment. And so that encompasses everything that we do, from how we relate with one another in our communities, with our neighbors, with our families, with our government, and in this case, civic engagement. How do we prepare ourselves to vote? And do we take voting serious? For many people, especially our older generations, they take voting very serious because they understand what it took to get the right to vote. People dying for that right, especially for women. It was only 100 years ago that we got the right to vote, and that was only for white women. For women of color, it was less than 100 years ago, right? Just yesterday, we celebrated 50 years of having the right to own a bank account or have the right to have a loan or a credit card, right? And so having the right to vote is so important, and that's part of our social environment, how we vote. And if we vote is what decides who our leaders are, who our representatives are, and do we elect the right representatives that, essentially speak for us and represent us. Either they represent us rightly or wrongly, and it's up to us to do that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, because honestly, with the time that we've seen here, especially here in the Inland Valley region, we've seen a lot of times that it's been somewhat a little bit difficult, to really civically engage our community here within the Inland Valley region. Would you like to touch further on that? Maybe talk about any obstacles or roadblocks you've seen when it comes to trying to civically engage community?
Yeah, so for decades here in the Inland Valley, it has been struggle after struggle, going back to redlining and just even going further back to the displacement of our native peoples, right? And the citrus companies coming into our area from the East Coast during the gold rush era, and just all the displacement and redlining and exploitation that we have seen for generations. And so because of that exploitation and displacement and oppression, we have permitted this lingering apathy to not participate in our government because we have been oppressed for so long. And instead of us fighting back and just saying enough is enough and going out to vote, people just rather stay out and not believe in the system, which I get because, here we are trying to dismantle these systems of oppression, right? So why participate in those anymore, right? But it also means voting and being there at the table to change them. And so it's that disconnection of not understanding that if you're not at the table, how can you change them, right? And so being part of that system of oppression has also created this sense of apathy in voting and not believing in our government that people have now stayed out for generations. And we're seeing it now more in our younger generations that they just have no faith in our government because of this feeling of oppression for a very long time.
Right. And I understand that one of the major things as well when it comes to the oppression of our community here is that we seem to see that when the conversations we have with, one on one with our neighbors, with our relatives, with our friends, and just general community, I also sense a like form of misinformation that
Yeah.
comes with, certain things. And I wanted to see if we could individually, both you and Joaquin wanted to discuss about both specifically Proposition 33 that is on the ballot this year, as well as Proposition 36.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would like to talk about Proposition 33, I know you've had a lot of work you'd like to talk
Yeah.
about on this one.
Yeah, so in 2015, one of my mentors that rest his soul, he got me involved in the Democratic Party, and I've been a delegate ever since. And so through this process, we were able to change the platform, and what that means. Every party in this country has their own platform, and we were able to create this platform that believes that everybody should have a right to housing. Everybody has the right to housing. So, in that section of the housing rights, we created a rent control platform. And since then, we have created bill after bill after bill to say, hey, we need rent control, especially in the state of California, where it's the most expensive place to live. We cannot allow these investors that have, jacked up our market to create this crazy inflation, or what I call price gouging of rents, that has really messed up our economic stability in our families. And so since then, every single bill that we have pushed forward has died at the legislature. And so what the renters decided to do this time around, they decided to collect signatures and put this on the ballot and said, let the voters decide. If we couldn't get this through the legislation, let's let the voters decide if they want rent control, so we can finally get this through and repeal Costa Hawkins and finally get the cities to do the right thing and impose their new ordinances to really stabilize the rent market and really create a fair system of rent control. And so that's what this proposition does. And we hope that everybody votes yes. And so we'll see what happens. There's a lot of misinformation, like you said. Of course, all the big investors and real estate companies are against it because they're going to lose their profits. But it's only fair that we do the right thing and just thing for our communities. It's enough is enough. They've already made their big profits. It's time that we do the right thing for our communities and demand rent control.
Truly, truly, I do believe that as well. And to be quite frank, with that in itself, I think there's a sort of, like you mentioned, the message that that comes with misinformation, where a lot of community are sort of held back from taking certain actions, especially when it comes to joining a certain movement and such, because of that sort of oppression and feeling of discontent that it comes with their own community and such. And I feel like as though it leads to sort of emotions of how you say not necessarily having trust in one another, not even when it comes to their government, but also just when it comes to one-on-one individually. And I think that's a good segue into Proposition 36. Joaquin, if you'd like to touch on that, essentially when it comes to the trust, when it comes to one-on-one and sort of giving an opportunity or a second opportunity to grow.
Yeah. Well, just on the same vein of misinformation, I think right now a lot of government figures and groups across the state, conservative groups, are kind of pushing fear into our communities about crime waves that are allegedly happening in our state, about the rise of theft and the rise of drug use but while they're saying that, what I'm hearing is that they want to criminalize our community and increase the profits of the private prison sector, expand prisons, and that's what they're trying to do with Prop 36. When they put this on the ballot, what they're trying to do is basically bring back the three strikes rule that used to exist during the war on crime, that ended up with mainly black and brown folks in behind bars. So what Prop 36 is doing is, bringing back misdemeanors to felonies. And a lot of folks, when they hear that, they think, oh, well, it's a consequence to a crime. Like we have to keep our streets safe. But the reality is that to this day, there hasn't been enough done to have some criminal justice reform. And the closest we've gotten to it so far is Prop 47 in 2014, which actually took a step forward in addressing these concerns about our criminal justice system and how it's serving our communities, and how we could change it to better our communities, to be more preventative instead of reactive to these issues. And we need to invest in our communities if we want to, um, help keep people out of prison, keep people from committing crimes. It's everything is more expensive now, like a lot more than it was even when Prop 47 was passed. Rent is out of control. People in our communities are living like four families to a house. They're like in the Inland Empire. One out of eight residents of the IE work or have something affiliated to a warehouse, working these minimum wage jobs, transitional jobs that are unstable, are high rigorous labor, dangerous, and not making enough to make ends meet, living paycheck to paycheck. And these conditions, create a hostile environment for our youth, for folks that are trying to find better opportunities, that want to do better for their families, for themselves. And we're left with these where we're at right now. And instead of addressing this issue and investing into our communities, creating job training centers, bringing better paying jobs, lowering rent, we want the state or whoever put this on the ballot wants to criminalize our communities. And it's going to be folks that might have committed a crime, or maybe robbed something when they were younger, or whatever, and now when they get their third misdemeanor, for anything, basically it's gonna be a felony, and it could be super harmful to their lives, for their future. And not only that, but they're disinvesting from so many programs that came after Prop 47, to for mental health, for helping folks getting out when transitional periods out of being detained, and now a lot of that is being erased through this prop. So it's super dangerous for our communities. Instead of investing into our communities, they're investing into the prison system, and that's just creating more disillusionment, or like just like an image of like that our communities are not safe, that we need to lock people up in order to make our community safe. And like you said, that's like where trust comes in, and how we see ourselves and our community, the people around us. And instead of seeing folks with empathy and wanting to bring these programs to help people, we're instead letting the fear, or this prop is trying to bring the fear into making folks vote, to lock people up.
And so we know how important these propositions are to our community, especially during this election year, because of how sort of drastic and intense we've seen actions just in general from this sort of platforms and such. I wanted to know, though, is that Joaquin, as you as a organizing coordinator and being able to reach out to community to discuss and inform, inspire, and connect with these community members here, specifically in the Inland Valley region, how would you say that experience has been in essentially community mobilization when it comes to here and elections and civic engagement?
So, um, when it comes to community mobilizations, I mean, it could come in different forms, like having community meetings, or going to a city council meeting, um, having workshops about civic engagement. And that's some of the stuff we did. We had an ambassador program, a civic engagement ambassador program, where we had a series of lessons where we went through collectively different topics of civic engagement. What we noticed is that our community members, folks that were participating, were happy to begin to understand like the complexities of like our government structure, how to like just understand what's going on in their city, who to talk to when something is going on, how do certain policies come to be, and then when we also had some ballot parties where we brought community together and we went through these ballot measures, talking about everything from the Prop 1, Prop 2 to Prop 36, and there were tough conversations, and there are a lot of folks already have been hearing this misinformation or have their own thoughts about it, but when you create a safe space for community where we can have open discussions, it's easy to have these conversations. They might be tough, but we talk through it. We bring the facts, the environmental justice perspective, and we have very productive conversations, and I'm super thankful for that. And we also have been going to our local government meetings, like the city council meetings and our municipal advisory councils in unincorporated areas. And this is like one of like the main ways you could see civic engagement in action when you go to these government officials and keep them accountable for what they're supposed to be doing. And we did that recently in Bloomington because there was a lot of concerns about street closures and the way it was affecting the quality of life of residents in Bloomington, because it was basically cutting off all their street access and leaving them into one congested street to come in and out of their community. And that was causing problems and people were raising concerns about emergency services, of what happened if they needed an ambulance to get there and they only had one street to access the community. So we went to the Bloomington MAC meeting, the Municipal Advisory Council, where it's the Municipal Advisory Council is made up of volunteers that are appointed by our supervisor of the district, which is Joe Baca Jr. And we had folks raising concern about this issue, talking about why weren't they notified about these street closures? Why don't they have like some type of procedure where they can make sure that there's good flow into these communities through like opening certain streets, or just making sure that there's not a huge disruption to their life. And it was I think it was like a great experience for community members to be able to like not only tell their neighbors about their how do you say, like, quejándose with their neighbors about these issues, like, oh, they're closing the streets again, but they could go straight to these representatives and tell them exactly how they feel. And luckily, I don't know if it was a result of our presence at that MAG meeting and our comments, but just a few days later they started opening up the streets again, and giving folks the access that they wanted, and solving some of those issues, so folks could like see firsthand what civic engagement could do. If you are active in your city, if you use your voice, because that's what civic engagement is about. Really, it's about being able to use your voice to represent yourself, your family, your community, and that's what we do here at CCAJ. That's one of our main mission is to work with the community, so to find solutions to issues, environmental justice issues, for the benefit of our public health and the environment.
Right. And I see that, one thing you mentioned was that access essentially is very important, especially when it comes to civic engagement. And I think that sort of works in itself as a sort of a circle of sorts, because, getting access to how to be civically engaged, whether that be, polling locations or ballot drop off places and such, is really important because that gives us the ability to speak our voice, because our voice matters and such. And at the same time, when we civically engage, we ourselves can give us more of that access when it comes to our communities and such. Now, for our viewers out there, we want to mention that although this episode may come out after November 5th, our election day, we do want to mention that on November 5th, all Omnitrans buses, as well as the Metrolink Aero, will be free for all community, all residents. So that way you yourself can make it to these polling locations and these ballot drop-offs so your voice can be heard. And with that, I wanted to touch base on...
Also,
yeah, go ahead. Of course.
State law allows folks to take 2 hours from their
Yes,
from
of
their
course.
workday to go vote. So their
They
employer
can't tell you no.
Yeah, they cannot tell you no. And that is highly important. That is highly important, especially for our young folks, because our young folks, especially, we're seeing that a lot of young folks are getting their ballots mailed, but yet not a lot of young folks are turning them in. So we want to not discourage you and tell you that you yourself, especially as a young adult, a young worker here in the Inland Valley region, you have the right to go out and vote. And as Anna mentioned, your employer has to give you that opportunity and that time. So with that, we wanted to touch a little bit more about how transportation policies and such can essentially affect not only just environmental justice in itself, but also, civic engagement. And I want to give that question to either of you. If either of you would like to, talk more about that, please feel free.
Yeah, well, I mean, oh my gosh, there's a lot. There's a lot to say. And I mean, I guess I can start with saying that for us here in the Inland Valley, the expansion of roads and especially freeways has been the intentional way of bringing environmental racism to our communities, dressed as economic opportunity, right? What they call economic development. And as I've been here in this organization, I have learned and studied that all of this was intentional to create this goods movement empire, right? And it's all started with the freeways, making it way and creating the conditions for now to all of this become industrialized, right? But before that, obviously, our planners and our elected officials, because they already had that mindset of bringing this industrialized world and economic development in their heads, they forgot to think about creating a system of walkable communities, right? And what does that mean? Like creating communities where you can work, live, and play, right? And just enjoy life in your own community and participate and just have this unity. And instead, we created a system where you can only find opportunities outside of this community. So that's why we see a lot of commuting in Orange County, to LA, to even San Diego. I have folks in my neighborhood that drive all the way to San Diego every day. And it's just crazy to me that we cannot find those opportunities here. And then for the folks that do work locally, they still have to buy a car to travel when they can just use a bus system or a bike or a scooter or something that can be obtained so easily. And instead, here we are investing and getting into debt just to purchase a car, right? And who do we make those profits? We enrich the fossil fuel companies and the car companies, right? Instead of creating better opportunities for our own communities. But that's the narrative, the systems that have been shoved down our throats, to think that if we have a car, we have a good lifestyle or we have a good, economic system in our own families. And that's way far from the truth. But instead changing the narrative, changing the systems to create these walkable communities. And that's where we become rich in our own communities, right? So changing that mindset and bringing more leaders that have that mindset and have that vision is what's going to bring better opportunity and sustainability for our communities. But here we are with these conditions that have been brought to us. So how do we fix it now? How do we shift that with what we have now, right? And that's what we're talking about with our community and seeing where we can find opportunities.
And one thing I've always been an advocate for is that when we look at roads, we shouldn't look at them as something that's only should, you know, be especially made for cars, because I feel like that in itself is essentially discriminatory based off of those who can't afford cars or those who have to rely on other methods of transportation, which is a good mention of public transportation, which I do believe is also super important. That it always seems like we never get enough funding for public transportation here in the region anyways. And it always feels like there's always better opportunities to grow.
It's just given to
The more
communities that advocate for it.
and are more affluent and have essentially higher income and things of that sort, you know, again, related to racial discrimination and things of that sort. And I think I wanted to see if, Joaquin, you wanted to talk a little bit more about, you know, what public transportation methods you've seen in our community, whether there should be improvements, how you see them yourself, and, you know, any experiences you've had with that, or what you would like to see for our community in the future.
Well, a lot more public transportation.
I agree.
Yeah, it's like we are nowhere near, you know, our capacity for public transportation, what we need or what the potential is for our community, to transport, like, you know, the 4 million people who live in the Inland Empire. Not even our Metrolink has the hours that are adequate for people to commute to work.
Yeah, especially that Riverside line, huh?
Like me, you know, because I live in Pomona. I have a Metrolink station like 3 blocks from my house. It's like a 7-minute walking distance for me. But they have no train lines in the morning to come to work, you know, and there's a train station from this office, the CCAJ headquarters. There's a train station about 10 minutes, the Jurupa Valley Pedley station. And if there was a train, you know, that was for working people that had a mentality of like, you know, let's like create opportunities for people who work in Riverside, or work in other like Paris or wherever else the train stops, you know, to be able to have that commute, but they don't have it. And that's similar to so many other public transportation systems in this region. There's the bus times. There's not enough bus times. There's not enough bike lanes. There's not enough of anything. And then when there is opportunities to improve our public transportation, what does SBCTA do? They get a hydrogen train. Right. Like, come on,
gosh,
like,
I know.
Like it's like we have the opportunity to invest into our future, and instead they look to like what's easier, or like how they could check another box, you know. This now, instead of, you know, because one day we're gonna end up going electric anyways, because that's the future.
Right, exactly.
And instead of going straight to electric, they took a short like a detour to hydrogen, and then, you know, years later they're gonna see that was a mistake.
Yeah, people are gonna look back at that and be like, "What were you doing?"
But it's just to keep the fossil fuel companies in business.
Exactly. It just a little bit longer. That's what they're aiming for. I know. It feels almost gimmicky in a way, you know, like that hydrogen in general, just because of the way they're sort of like implementing it as like it's the future. It's like, no, the future was already here with electric and green energy sources. But
yeah, we should probably have a whole podcast on just hydrogen.
I know.
You know what? We'll bring Marvin.
Yeah, we're gonna bring Marvin.
Yeah, Marvin, our policy coordinator here at Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice. Special shout out. But
I also wanted to mention real quick, going back to like what Anna was talking about. You know, everything that she was saying is, you know, our a concept that we believe in at CCAJ, the just transition that we need for our communities, moving from an extractive economy to a localized economy. You know, right now we live in a neoliberal capitalism that's like transcends, you know, countries and trade and all this, you know, creating what we have now in the Inland Empire, like the warehouse empire, because of the global trade, because of making everything globalized instead of localized. Now, you know, what do we even have manufactured in the IE? All these warehouses just store things that were made somewhere else, you know, brought here through ships that also pollute our oceans, our air, and then they get to the ports where they pollute the port side communities, and then they get on trucks, and those trucks pollute those communities. They come to these communities and they pollute. So it's like it's just a whole life cycle of pollution.
No,
that
yeah.
exists. And it's all because of the way our economy works and then the transportation system is just it's a huge part of that. And what we have right now in California is just a system of transportation that is not made for communities, is made for the transportation of goods. And that's why they keep on expanding them and making them larger. What California, the reason it's even exists is because they found gold, and then they wanted to exploit that, and then they created the train barons started to come to California and expand the train to move goods from the east to the west coast, and just expanding that, and the remnants are still here to this day, just destroying our communities.
Yeah, one of the earliest forms of our environmental injustices here in California was that gold rush, because of just the displacement that had occurred for a lot of immigrants coming in, and the sort of classism that came with that, and just the general sort of discontent about this sort of idealism of following something at any means. It's something that we look back historically and really have to bring that up, so and so often. Something I wanted to touch on to see if we could, keep it in the podcast. Maybe not, maybe so. Who knows? But LA Dodgers just played, the World Series, with the Yankees and such. You're wearing the hat, so you for our viewers, Joaquin Castillejos clocked in today, immediately singing "We Are the Champions, we are." But yeah, one thing I wanted to note though is, a little history lesson for a lot of our Dodgers fans. Here in Southern California, it's Dodgers or it's not Dodgers. Well, sorry for the 4 Angel fans listening. I'm sorry, but this is Dodger
territory.
Dodger territory, exactly. But a little history lesson for those who don't know: the Dodger Stadium, back when it was built within the early 1900s, was built off of the idea of the displacement of a very early Latino community within the Los Angeles area that were some of the very first homeowners there in Los Angeles. The Chavez Ravine, exactly. I wanted to see if you both wanted to touch a little bit about that, because although we see that a lot of our community really is a Dodgers fan, to learn a little bit of history about it, I feel like is also important, and how we can essentially, grow from that. Because I'm not saying to, our Dodgers fans, be a Dodger hater. I'm saying like learn a little bit about the history to see what it took to get here.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to the capitalistic cycle, right? Of like the 1% having all this power and money, and just because of that power and money, just picking a location and say, I want to build something here. Who cares about who lives there? Just like what happened in Bloomington, right? Yeah. Here came Howard Industrial and said, I want to build warehouses here. So let's buy up all these homes and let's move them and let's build warehouses, right? So the same thing with stadiums, with other types
centers,
of industrial, industries and commercial and other places, right?
Yeah.
And it's just that cycle of like that 1% having all the power and the 99% not either being involved enough or not having the money to fight it, or affording an attorney that can fight back and represent them and really win a lawsuit against them, right? And that's what we face here at CCAJ sometimes, that we have the opportunity to fight some of these projects, but because we don't have the funds, or our communities don't have the funds, sometimes we have to choose our battles. And it's unfortunate because the law is supposed to be on our side, but if we don't have the money to fight it, then we can't even use the law to make it count, right? So it's one of those things.
Yeah, funny how that works, huh?
And not only that, and then you have elected officials who are not on the side of the community too,
Right.
which is also what happened in Chavez Ravine.
Exactly.
Exactly.
The elected officials were pushing for this Dodger Stadium.
Yeah, and the mayor as well.
And they were a big reason why it happened. It's same, what we've seen in our own communities with the expansion of warehouses.
Right.
When we talk about environmental justice, we talk about how we view our land, the earth. And for like investors and developers, they see land and they see the money signs, and replaces their eyes. they don't see the value of our land, of communities. They see where they can make the most profit, and when they saw that land, the Chavez Ravine, they didn't see a community there. They didn't see families and history and
the
culture,
traditions and culture, yeah,
all they saw was the possibilities of making money,
of a profit,
of profiting and flipping this land to make money. And part of our principles as an environmental justice organization is that we don't see land as a something dead, as something that we could just make money off of as property. Land is part of who we are, of our communities. It represents us, and and that's a mentality, and that we're also preach to our community, to value not only like the land but themselves, because when they see like themselves in the land, there's a deeper connection, to how they feel about their community, their city. But if it also depends on the city too. If the city doesn't like make put value into these communities by investing in them and all this, but we have to see that value in our communities, to know that this is not just land that we could sell and then just move on, but it's like we live here, and like our memories are here, and it means something, to be part of these communities, and to be able to live on this land, and we are going to continue fighting against the idea that land is just up for grabs for profit, that we could exploit the land and our people to grow the bank of these developers and investors, and for the people in Chavez Ravine, they fought really hard. They organized, they
very much
advocated, but during that time there was not enough the social media that exists now, that to really raise their voice,
right, because it's a very powerful tool.
Yeah. But today, we could honor the history of the folks of Chavez Ravine, and remember their struggle, and related to what's happening.
And in
now.
fact, Wendy Carrillo, the assembly member that just finished her term, she passed a bill to get reparations for the Chavez Ravine families in this legislative cycle. So we applaud her efforts for passing that, and we appreciate her getting some reparations for those families.
I mean, like, taking into consideration, we are 100 years, give or take, like from when that I'm saying that with
I think it was like 1950s.
Like, I want to exaggerate it for our viewers because we really
You're
have
young,
to show
we get it.
exactly.
It seems like long ago.
It just seems like forever ago. Well, regardless.
And if you think about it, like the land, what they got was pennies to what they've made to this day.
Exactly.
In the decades of selling tickets, of Dodger gear, of everything,
the royalties, everything.
They owe it a lot to these folks that had their land taken away. And they should get some of that back. That's why the reparations movement is so important.
Right. And that's not really, it's really on Dodgers management and things of that sort. Those that representation of that, which should really take into consideration about the history, because we do have, in that instance, community that like grew from this experience culturally, and now has like essentially like raised from this bad experience a culture of unity between our region based off of this sport. Again, the sport that was implemented and such, which I could go on and on about. But regardless, I really enjoy that you both essentially saw that connection, that tie-in with even today with our communities and the warehousing issue that we have, and just in general this sort of like industrial development that's been occurring, in which that it's a land use issue, right? And that's what we're seeing now with essentially the buying out of homes of renters that can't even do anything about it, because it's that rent owner that essentially has that final say in the matter and things of that sort. Or like even schools being shut down and being bought just because the opportunity for economic development, as we were saying, is there and prevalent essentially. So I really do enjoy that we were able to touch base on that and really dive deep into what that means and how it correlates with our community. And so I think we've essentially reached closer to the end time of this. I want to give it to both of you, any final remarks, anything you'd like to add to any of the previous conversations, or just a new topic And, if you'd like to go ahead, Joaquin, I could see that you're very...
I was gonna, yeah, just to close it off, like, at the end of the day, all our conversations ties back to who's representing us and what values they hold. If we have, like, we don't, like, I still don't understand how complex our government system is, and I learn about new boards every day, and once we understand, just the power that they hold to affect our lives, we will value like who's representing us and how they represent us, as just as we move forward as a community, we have to think about that. I remember reading about indigenous folks in Peru. Peru, and they were like fighting to protect their land from being developed by, the government who saw the land as like, and what one of the leaders said is that we're never gonna be able to like have a good like a conversation or to come to an understanding with these people, because they see this as property, as something to be developed, and we see it as like our brother, as our family, as some, and that's the same vein with what's going on if we're never be able to come to an understanding with our elected officials to like understand that we don't want pollution in our communities, that we don't want to trade our health and well-being, for economic development. We're never going to come to an understanding if they don't have the same beliefs as us.
Right. I mean, how are businesses going to tell us what's best for community? Community knows what's best for community.
Yeah. So we know, and since we know, our elected officials should know too. And we know when we vote, we have to know that they are on the same understanding as us, as what we think about our community, how we feel about it. Yeah, and that's that's my closing statement. Like when we vote, to vote for our representatives that represent our values.
And if you'd like to go.
Yeah, so same as Joaquin, full circle. Voting is very important. Making sure that you participate in your local elections is the most important thing you can do as a responsible citizen in your community, and also speaking for the ones that cannot vote. And so, doing your research, asking questions of who your elected officials are going to be to, be the best representatives who are going to truly represent the community and their best interests. It's truly the most important job that we can have as residents. And so really taking that into account and being responsible in voting is crucial to ensure that we continue to have these conversations and we have people at the table that are making decisions that are going to help our communities thrive, and not the 1%, but the entire community as a whole, and that we have a balance. And right now we've thrown our communities out of balance. And so how do we bring that balance back? I think it's possible still. I think we still have a lot of potential. And I think we can still turn things around to make things better.
Always. Yeah. I mean, we have one of the most massive, young voter just in general populations that we have, just because there's so many young people, and in that there's so much potential, because young people are always being inspired, always wanting to make positive change and such. But there's always that one thing that maybe prevents them, whether that be not efficient time, or whether that be misinformation, whether that be, just a general sort of like doomerism that they sometimes get, because they say like, oh, my vote doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's like, no, that's not true, because people always think that, oh, it doesn't matter because at the higher level, all the way up to the president, like it's really difficult. It's like, yeah, but local issues have such a big impact when it comes to you, because you are locally, like you are yourself, and you see all the things at the local level that can just occur just from attending a couple city council meetings, learning about the issues, and then just organizing just your neighborhood. Because at that point, once you organize someone in your neighborhood, someone from that neighborhood will organize the next neighborhood next door, or like in the next cul-de-sac.
Effect.
Exactly, a domino effect. So
I wanted to give a quick example to like young folks, like if you're a young person and you like going out, and maybe you live in Fontana and you're like, there's nowhere to go here, you have to go to Riverside or Redlands, and they have downtown areas that are lively, entertaining, How did that come to be? Because at one time they had elected officials
Right.
who made these downtown areas what they are today.
Exactly.
They through their general plans, through city council meetings, they said, okay, let's make the downtown, accessible, walkable, and that's something that's a possibility in any city.
community.
If you
Always.
have the right elected officials.
Exactly, always.
Right.
So, once again, I wanted to thank both Ana Gonzalez, Executive Director here at the Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice, and Joaquin Castillejos, Organizing Coordinator here at CCAJ, for attending our podcast. Now, for our YouTube viewers, the camera died. That's what happened there. Yeah, that cable that's connected, I guess it wasn't charging it. It was just sending a signal. So, the battery was a little bit low, so that's why, but we lasted like a pretty good time, I'd say.
Yeah.
No worries though. I'll just edit a little, bit. It's like, apologies, the camera's dead, but they could still listen on, even on YouTube.
That's okay.
So, once again, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Joaquin. And that's a wrap on Let's Clear the Air.
Yay.
Yay.
Yay.